A very hot political week for Michigan. The Trump and Biden campaigns roll in while the president and the governor lock horns over the response to COVID-19. A new poll gives us the current snapshot. And the mayor turns to voters to keep clearing out dilapidated houses in Detroit because the federal money for it has run out. Today is Sunday, September 13th, 2020, and this is Flashpoint. Hi there, and welcome to Flashpoint after a barn burner of a week on the news front. And as we long expected, Michigan is right in the middle of it. We are now 50 days from Election Day, so of course, the presumed swing states are now getting more attention than an ice cream truck at a kindergarten. This week, the Michigan visits of both Joe Biden and then Donald Trump were given a dose of rocket fuel by the revelations from the new book from Bob Woodward that shows us a very conflicting, duplicitous, and that's putting it kindly, picture of the president in the pandemic. But perhaps you disagree. I again return to the theme I have voiced time and time again on this program. Both sides seem so soldered into their positions. I don't know that the hue and cry move the needle one way or the other. I feel a bit like a modern Diogenes. The Greek philosopher was noted for searching the world over trying to find one honest man. Well, here I am searching the nation over trying to find one undecided voter. Are there any? We're going to talk about that as we discuss the findings from the latest Local 4 Detroit News poll. Richard Zuba says he has never seen voter engagement at the levels we see right now, and our pollster will join me in just a moment. Also, we're going to talk about something else that Detroit voters will find on their ballots should Detroiters pass a bond proposal to keep Mayor Duggan at work tearing down old dilapidated houses and buildings. Or is it a time for tightening belts rather than loosening them? It's all today on Flashpoint. All right, let's start with politics this morning. We released the results of a new poll early last week. And now let's note, it was polling done before the events of a rather wild week. But there is in the numbers a lot that we expect may not be very changeable, starting with the engagement that voters are feeling, the energy that is pushing them to vote. Joined now by our pollster from the Glenn Gariff Group, Richard Zuba, and we've got Nolan Fenley from the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson from Detroit Today on WDET to dig into the findings as well. Richard, let me start with you. Your notes to those of us here at Local 4 about the poll, you've just never seen, you thought you'd never seen higher voter motivation than in 2018, and yet even higher now.
Well, you know what's amazing to me is in 2016, we're having the exact opposite conversation. We're seeing motivation to vote numbers amongst independents that were 5.6 on a 10-point scale. We now see voters motivated at a 9.7 on a 10-point scale. It's the highest level I've seen in 37 years, and it's everybody. All sides, middle, left, right, everybody is motivated to vote this year.
So does that mean then the advantage is spread out and equal, or does that kind of motivation favor one candidate over the other when it comes to the presidential race?
Well, when you look at Michigan electoral history, large turnouts benefit Democrats. The math is just that there are more Democrats in Michigan than there are Republicans. It's just that Republicans historically are better at turning out and voting in elections. And I think what we're seeing here is if everybody's motivated to vote at equally high levels, the advantage goes to the Democrats and it goes to Joe Biden. Well, whether or not that continues is something we're going to watch for the next 6 weeks. But certainly we've seen these levels of motivation now since 2018. Well,
on the front then of the Democrats and Joe Biden, it's interesting to note all the things that I mentioned what wasn't included in the polling, just what happened this past week. But we go back to the polling that you did in January, which of course didn't include the COVID response. Joe Biden's support has remained largely unchanged. And I keep going back time and time again to everybody being, to my way of thinking, cemented into their positions. And I don't see much flow in the middle anywhere.
This race feels like it's stuck in cement. And the one finding I took from this survey is the great stability of this race. Despite all the chaos and all the noise, there's been a lot of stability. And Donald Trump's job approval cannot climb above 43%. And we've had him pegged at this 42% number for some time now. And until he can improve his job approval with voters, there's no oxygen for him to move. And you mentioned what happened this week, and I don't think this week changed anything or changed any opinions.
That is astonishing, Nolan. We really did have, this was no longer he said, she said. There are tapes this time, and the president was caught in a lie about the way that he responded to the coronavirus, and yet nothing moved. Should I be surprised by that? Isn't that astonishing?
Well, when has anything moved over the last 4 years? I mean, we've gone through all sorts of scandals, allegations, conspiracy theories, impeachment, and that approval number has never moved. I think he has a very solid base of support. The question in Michigan is, can you get that base of support over 50%? If Michigan holds true to form, I mean, you would never think a Republican presidential candidate would have much of a chance here. And yet Donald Trump surprised us in 2016. Question becomes, can he surprise us again? I mean, I don't think any of us sat here in September of 2016 thinking Donald Trump had much of a chance here.
In fact, Stephen, I don't sense, I've heard from a few people, but by and large, I don't sense a lot of end-zone dancing being done by Democrats, even over what happened the past week. Nothing feels certain.
Well, I mean, it's about turnout, as Richard said. And what happened in 2016, remember, is not that that Donald Trump turned out more Republican voters than past Republican candidates. In fact, he got fewer votes than both Mitt Romney and John McCain. It's that Hillary Clinton was unable to bring out the Democratic votes who had given the state to Democrats for almost 30 years. And so the reason Democrats are not calming down now is that they don't want to repeat that. They want to make sure that they have the kind of turnout that gives them the chance to win Michigan. And that means people in Detroit have got to vote in larger numbers, and Democrats in the Detroit suburbs, Oakland County and Macomb, both counties that Barack Obama won twice. You've got to make sure that people show up and actually vote. And of course, there's big questions this year about how those votes get counted and whether they get cast the right way. The mail-in complicates things, and Democrats should be nervous about that.
Well, you've teed that up for me quite nicely. That's what I was going to get to next with Richard. Richard, according to your polling numbers, 38% of the voters that you talk to are planning to vote by mail. 54% say they'll be doing it in person at the ballot box. What does that mean ultimately, do you suppose, not just for the counting, but for the way the results turn?
Well, first of all, let's talk about the results. I mean, when you look at the people who are voting absentee, Joe Biden has a 68 to 25% lead amongst those absentee voters. They are wildly disproportionately Democratic and independent voters. Republicans are going to the ballot box on Election Day. So those first votes we're going to see on Election night are going to be the Republican votes that come in. And we have to remember that. But it also, creates a strange dynamic on election night if those clerks aren't allowed to prepare those absentee ballots ahead of time, where we're going to have Donald Trump looking like he's winning big, and suddenly those absentee votes come in and Joe Biden just sweeps ahead. And I think that's a big problem for us to deal with.
Nolan, there are a number of Republicans I've talked to who believe it was a real mistake for the president to go after mail-in voting, that it kind of was a chilling effect on Republicans doing the very same thing which he needs.
Yeah, I mean, they should be out there doing just what, Democrats are doing, get a absentee ballot in the hands of every dead Republican they could find. It's a curious strategy. But, you look at this, and once again, the similarities to 2016 that I see is, once again, Democrats are counting on Donald Trump to turn out their voters. Even Joe Biden isn't talking about Joe Biden. It's all about Donald Trump. And I believe the challenge for Democrats is to build enthusiasm beyond just voting against Donald Trump. They've got to build some excitement about voting for Joe Biden.
That remains a problem, doesn't it, Stephen?
It does, but already you're seeing some really different strategy this time than you saw in 2016. I mean, Joe Biden was here in the state of Michigan this week. Hillary Clinton did not come to Michigan, I believe, in the last 9 or 10 months.
Rather famously, yes.
Or Wisconsin.
or go into Wisconsin, another place that Biden has his eyes on. I think it's going to be hard to compare the performance or the strategy and the campaign 4 years ago to this year. I think Democrats are not going to make the same mistakes. The question is going to be about Election Day and how people respond and how many people actually show up to vote, or if they cast those votes by mail-in, if they're going to count and if they can get counted ahead, as Richard said. I mean, those are the real questions. It really is about how the balloting goes this year. That's really going to decide what happens in terms of the outcome. And that's a little different than 2016.
Well,
And in Michigan, you've got to get those ballots in well ahead of Election Day because they have to be in hand.
It's got to be there on Election Day.
That's different from some other states. So people who hang on to those ballots until the last day or two or week risk not having their vote counted.
That'll be a problem. I quickly want to also make sure we get to the Senate race here. Richard, you've got the race. Peters right now by 3, which is inside the margin of error on this. So I guess the general wisdom on this, conventional wisdom on it would be how goes the presidential race, goes the Senate race. Is that fair?
Well, anybody who thinks this race is done isn't paying attention. This is a very close Senate race right now. And I think if Republicans didn't have so many incumbent senators to defend across the country, they would be pouring a lot more money into this race in Michigan right now. Yeah. But, as we look at the undecided voters in the Senate race, they lean a little disproportionately to the Democratic side. So there's some room for Gary Peters to grow. But he's got to get those people there, and he hasn't yet. So this is a close race, and it's going to continue to be a close race. And, Gary Peters is a first-term U.S. senator. They face tough re-election fights. But I do think as Michigan goes, so will this Senate race.
Your thoughts on that, Stephen? What's your worry level over Gary Peters for Democrats?
No, I think it's a close race, as Richard said. I think a lot of it does owe to the fact that this is Peter's first term, and that first reelection bid is always tougher than the rest of them seem to be. I also would give credit to John James, who I think is running a much better campaign this time than he did against Debbie Stabenow. Yeah. I see him on television more. I think he is making points that resonate with some voters, and so Peters is going to have to fight to pull this out. Although I do think it seems very unlikely that if Biden wins Michigan, that James would win that Senate seat. I think in the end, that seems one of the most unlikely outcomes.
Nolan, you do want to learn from experience, and I think a lot of people feel that John James is running a different kind and better race this time around than he did against Stabenow.
Yeah, his messaging is sharper. He's grown some. Experience is a wonderful thing when it comes to campaigning. And who knows, he's a strong, attractive African-American candidate. Maybe he benefits from the Black Lives Movement this time around.
He won't even acknowledge the Black Lives Movement for the most part. So,
and unfortunately, we don't have very many debates that the two have agreed to right now. Only 2, and not in the most primetime slots. Richard, lastly, quickly about Gretchen Whitmer's performance, getting almost 2 out of every 3 Michiganders supporting the way that she's handled coronavirus.
Yeah, she's got 60% job approval here in Michigan. Independents really are on board with her right now. And I say right now because we've seen political leaders have these great leads and these great approval ratings that, dissipate with the next crisis. So she's handling this one well right now. The one benefit I think that is going to have in November is she is going to play very well with independents in Southeast Michigan in selling both Biden and Peters. And she will have an influence in these state house races in Oakland County.
Then we got to leave it there. I do need to make one quick correction. My producer, Jamie Walters, just reminded me that so far, Peters and James have only actually agreed to 1 debate together. They've both agreed to 2, but 2 different ones. So right now, just 1 set. Guys, thanks very much. When we come back, we'll talk about Proposal N, which will be on the ballot in Detroit. This is Flashpoint on Local 4.
The The biggest Labor Day sale ever continues at Gardner White. Save up to $800 on the largest selection of Beauty Rest mattresses with 0% financing up to 72 months. Plus free TVs or bikes. Like Beauty Rest Black, just $16 a month. The Labor Day sale continues at Gardner White.
At Beaumont, we're always ready for change. So when COVID-19 changed the way our community needed us, we created change to serve them even better. Change that made safer return-to-work programs with on-site screenings possible. Change that let us pivot quickly and care for the most COVID-19 patients in all of Michigan. Because the one thing that will never change is our commitment to you.
There's a reason we have more cars, more brands, and more selection than any other dealer in Michigan. The reason is you. With 43 Michigan locations and 34 different brands, the Suburban Collection has more ways to make your purchase, service, and overall automotive experience the best in Michigan. From your first car to your dream car, and everything in between. Go to drivesuburban.com and get your car today.
The biggest Labor Day sale ever starts now at Gardner White. Free delivery, free bikes, free HP laptops. Win a $5,000 room makeover. The biggest Labor Day sale ever starts now at Gardner White, Detroit's new #1 furniture store.
Ready or not, it's starting to feel like fall, and with that comes haunted house season. But how will this local horrifying haunt protect their guests from coronavirus?
There's a lot of changes to help with crowd control, but still a lot more inside here that I guarantee you will make you scream.
Find out why they say they're ready to scare you safely.
As long as we keep everybody separated and we do that naturally, we should be fine.
Join us Monday at 6 a.m. on Local 4 News Today.
All right, welcome back. About a month ago, the last abandoned house to be brought down with federal money fell in Detroit. And now what? Well, the mayor is asking you to pass Proposal N, which is a bond proposal that would provide another $250 million to keep the work going that would cover another, it's estimated, 8,000 structures. Let's talk about with that and a few other matters with Detroit's head of housing planning and development, Arthur Jemison, back with us again on Flashpoint. Arthur, good to see you. Thanks for the time.
Great to see you again.
Let's start with Proposal N. There are some who would say that, look, you came and the mayor asked us for more money for demolitions before, had a plan, and he just won't take no for an order. Why is Proposal N different?
Proposal N is different because we spent about 6 or 8 months after the initial proposal was voted down, talking with council members, talking with members of the community about the proposal, why we thought it was important, and what we thought it needed to do. They gave us some really good input about what needed to change. I mean, led by council members like Member Benson, Member Spivey, Member Ayers, all of whom gave really great input. Specifically, they said this proposal needs to be focused on both rehabilitation and demolition. These two things together are what make neighborhood change happen. They also indicated that we needed to make sure that this had a stimulative effect on the economy and that it was very targeted on Detroit-based and headquartered businesses to make sure that, and that's really, I think, one of the things that's distinguished it from the proposal last year.
The rehabilitation portion is important here because anybody that does the math says $250 million for 8,000 houses. Is it now $31,000 to knock down a house? The money is for, there's more, I guess, than just demolition is what you're saying.
There's a combination of demolition, 8,000 houses, and we are going to be stabilizing and preserving approximately 8,000 houses. Just to give you an example, while there are some houses that can't be saved, we think there's about 8,000 houses that can be saved. The hardest hit fund allowed us to take down 21,000, but what we're as proud of is the about 8,000 houses that we were able to get new buyers and households and families in. So the 8,000, the proposal end doesn't just take down 8,000 houses. We're going to be stabilizing and preserving 8,000 more by removing any debris and trash and properly disposing of it, by securing the exterior, and by making roof improvements that make it possible for water to stop infiltrating. That will give us a chance to put those on the Land Bank website and get new private owners for those homes. We're excited about it.
As we go back and look over the history of, as important as this work is in cleaning up Detroit, we've seen problems running the gamut from soil replacement to problems with the way that the demolition contracts were put out early in the process. How do you convince Detroiters that it's all been, that part of the cleanup has been cleaned up?
So that was another essential part of the feedback loop between the city administration and the council and community members. It comes up in every forum that I do with folks that, how do we know that the program is being run differently? So the short answer is that we brought demolition back into the direct supervision and oversight of the Detroit City Council by creating a demolition department. And we also are impaneling an advisory board that's going to be reviewing the procurements on a once or twice a year basis with a series of council and administration appointed advisory participants. That way, we're able to get both the kind of oversight that you get from the city council when they approve every contract, and you're also going to be able to have community members be part of the process of reviewing the implementation.
Arthur, I'd like to move to now what's happened with the pandemic. A lot of the work that you've been doing in the neighborhoods, I think you were starting to see a fair amount of traction. You and I've talked about this before. You saw retail showing up in neighborhoods. You saw some restaurants that were getting a lot of attention and starting in areas where we hadn't seen that before. And then we get a pandemic. What's this doing to your work?
Well, in some respects, I guess my part is kind of the easy part. I get to work with DPW on building streets. I get to work with GSD on expanding parks. I get to work with HRD on housing developments. And if you go to Kercheval right now, across from Sister Pie, you'll see a big multifamily mixed income development going up, and you'll see a park that's going to start shortly, and you'll be on a street that's being reconstructed. That's work we're proud of. One of the things that's been toughest, though, is the way this has hit our small businesses.
Yeah.
We just lost DIB, where I got the Friday bagels every week, and
we're Institute of Bagels, right?
Exactly, and we've got a lot of businesses at risk around the city. We've been doing programs like Feed the Front Lines and other things to get business to the small businesses, but it's been a real challenge, and I think it's a real focus of the Growth Corporation and the Jobs and Economy team that I partner with often to get more resources to them. Detroit Means Business is a place that people can go now, I believe, and get good background on programmatic responses. But yes, it's been rough, but I think we're starting to see, again, with places like Yellow Light Donuts, businesses are still opening, and we're going to keep using our resources to make sure that they do.
Let's hope so. In fact, you have to worry about how much we haven't seen yet, the places that we're hoping to see reopen eventually that may just never get a chance to do that. So it really has been a tough stretch for a lot of folks that are already in a really tough field to begin with. Arthur, it's always good to have you on the program. I really appreciate it, and stay safe. We'll talk to you again soon.
I will. Thanks for the invite.
You bet. When we come back, we'll go 3 and Out. This is Flashpoint on Local 4.
When battling an addiction, the road to recovery can be very difficult. But the Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network can help. We have trained clinicians providing support for treatment, prevention, and recovery. You are not alone. Call us today. We're here for you 24/7. Here to talk, here to help. 800-241-4949.
DTE Energy customers can get their share of huge lifetime energy cost savings. How? By using our website. The Oslin's new programmable thermostat saved them a bundle. And their new efficient furnace earned them a hefty rebate. All over Michigan, people like the Oslins are saving. Why not you? There are always new ways to save at dteenergy.com/saveenergy. DTE Energy.
Back to school is on everyone's mind.
This is such an unprecedented situation.
From student-teacher safety to how families are coping.
I would like some guidance. I would like some help.
That's why Local 4 and Click on Detroit are committed to covering the education crisis.
We've been spending a lot of time talking to teachers and administrators and parents.
They may have to make a choice, and sometimes it's not an easy choice.
Helping you decide what's best for your family. Look for our Education for All coverage on Local 4 and Click on Detroit.
Kimberly Gill, from the moment she hit the streets of Detroit to cover the stories that affect all of us, she's proven time and time again that she cares. Cares about the people who live here, who work here. Cares about getting the facts right, pulling no punches, and telling it like it is. We live in a special time. Make sure you're getting your news from someone you trust. Kimberly Gill and the Local 4 News team. Local news has never been more important. All right, before we say so long, let's do what we hope the Lions don't do. Let's go 3 and out. First off, I am really fascinated by the case involving the Postmaster General Louis DeJoy. Yes, I'm following the worries over changes at the Postal Service in advance of the election, but my particular interest at the moment concerns the accusations that in his pre-Postal Service business life, he reimbursed employees for the political contributions they made. It immediately brought to mind to me the case from around 15 years ago when similar accusations were made against Jeffrey Feiger and his then law partner, Ben Johnson. They managed to escape the charges against them, courtesy of legendary attorney Jerry Spence. I wrote a piece about that for the brand new Flashpoint newsletter, and you can sign up for that at our website at clickondetroit.com. All right, also this week we saw COVID giveth and taketh away when it comes to your breakfast plans. Arthur mentioned this. Terribly sad news for Corktown as the owners of the much-beloved Detroit Institute of Bagels announced they've had enough. They are selling, though they're hoping they can find someone who wants to keep the bagel business going. On the plus side, after being shut down since the start of the pandemic, Dutch Girl Donuts is back in business. Not yet back to their customary 24-hour operation, but donut lovers and perhaps bagel lovers willing to convert can rejoice. Finally, it's going to be a strange scene about 2.5 hours from now at Ford Field, which will be pretty much empty except for the Detroit Lions and the Chicago Bears. For decades, Lions fans have wanted real change. Well, they've got it. We'll see if it means a change for the team's fortunes. That is it for today. Meet the Press coming up next. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next Sunday right back here for Flashpoint.